I want to touch on some of the general aspect of the global economy. First, I think the knowledge becomes very important input into the global production. And then the global division of labor becomes more intense, and then there's a cross-border supply chains becomes very important. And then, so this, I just want to touch on some new important phenomena in the global supply chains. First one is the global sourcing. In old days, most of the parts are supplied domestically. For example, in automobile, so Toyota or Hyundai automobile used to supply their parts domestically. But these days, these got supplied from cross-border import and export from the many parts suppliers all over the world. So, and then that is it's caused by the lower the trade barriers and then lower cost of transportation. Second important aspect is the supply consolidation. The number of suppliers has significantly reduced. Just as in the case of hard disk drive, they used to have 6 suppliers in the global scale. Now we have 3 suppliers. Same thing happened in the flat TV screens. So the number of suppliers in the global market has significantly reduced. Only a few big suppliers dominate the market. Another case is automobile. The number of automobile manufacturers has significantly reduced during the last decade. Third important aspect is the production agglomeration. There's a geographic concentration. As in the case in hard disk drive, Thailand supplies around 44% of the world production, and then China supply about 25%. Only 2 countries dominate, supply 70% of the world production. So if there's one small risk factor can affect global supply. So that is the production agglomeration is a very important event, and that it will continue to be more important factor in the global supply chains. Fourth aspect is the logistic consolidation. It depends on very selected hub and infrastructures. If there's some kind of a disaster situation in one hub port, it can affect the supply chains of the global scale. For example, what happened in one port, it goes out to Singapore. For example, Singapore labor union has a strike in one port. Then it affects the supply chains in the global scale. So those are the important phenomena in the global scale. This illustrates the example of the change from the national supply chain to the global supply chains. Here in this case is all the suppliers located in the nation A, or the customers are in nation A. But in the global supply chains, all the production was scattered around the country A, B, C, and then you have to get supplied in the focal company, and then all the parts get together at the focal firms, and then it's supplied in the world market. So that is the illustration of the global supply chain change. So as a result, the small error or small risk can affect the global supply chains and increase the risk of the global supply chain disruptions. So this is the example of how the airline Boeing 787 is assembled. All parts are gathered in the one factory from all over the world. Another case is that the iPhone is assembled in China, and then the parts coming from Taiwan, Germany, Korea, and the rest of the world, and it is assembled in China, and it exported to all of the world. So I want to present 2 cases. The first case is that a little bit, I interpret the natural disaster or more broad concept. because in Korea we don't have a flood or earthquake. So, but maybe disease is a very important natural disaster which Korea is now experiencing. So I think this is very specific. The foot and mouth disease is a very contagious disease for the animals. So, Korea used to be free from foot and mouth disease, but since the number of travelers increase in Asian countries, Korea start to get some infected by foot and mouth disease. We suspect it comes from Vietnam. So one worker who traveled to Vietnam has come up with this disease, and then it has been spread all over Korea. And then it has a significant damage to the industries. So this is it cost a significant amount of the budget, and also it has a significant consequence because you cannot export meat or related product. So all the export market has been disrupted. It affects the supply chains, and then even it also affects the trade pattern as long as the meat is concerned in this case. So this is the most recent outbreak of the foot and mouth disease. It is very prevalent in China, Mongolia, and Taiwan, even North Korea, and then in Vietnam. So this kind of disease is very prevalent in ASEAN countries. So even though one country do their best to block this disease, you can, even though you become a free country from foot and mouth disease, next year you can import disease eventually from other countries, because there are so many travelers who can bring this disease to for example, is Korea. So any efforts by one country is not enough, because you can stop this disease for 1 year, but in the future you will eventually get affected by disease imported from other countries. So it's important to have some efforts in a more Asian level or multinational level too. So this is the outbreak situation in Korea. Then it happened in 2000, 2002, and then it has been silent for a couple of years. 2010, we had a significant impact. We have 3 cases in the January, April, and then towards the end of 2010. So we have 2 or 3 years of absence, and then last year, 12, 14, we have an outbreak. So it's very difficult to predict when this disease will be, we experience the outbreak of this disease. So the government is very cautious to prevent this outbreak of this disease. And then this is the, okay, I cannot see the details in the budget-wise. The Korean government is just a simple government budget to fight against this disease. The government spent about 200 and 300 billion won for government budget. But in 12 to 10, the total cost is about 3 trillion Korean won. So it increased more than 20 times. So this is a very serious period. The all Korean export of meat has been banned, and then all the farmers and then the related business lost significant amount of loss in terms of the economic values. So I don't want to go details about this. So as a result, the Korean government made several. Okay, let me highlight where it has been. It has been centered around the Seoul and the Gyeonggi province areas. And then the total budget Korean government spent is about in this year about 3 trillion won. So it's a significant amount of budget we have to spend. Since this is a very contagious disease, once there's an outbreak in one farm, the government goes in and then they slaughter every animals within the radius of 3 kilometers. So as a result, the government has to maybe compensate to the farmers for the slaughtered animals. Then, if they contain it within 3 kilometers, that's fine. If they fail, there's another outbreak in another neighboring farms. They go out and then kill every animals for 3 kilometers radius. So this is a since this disease is very contagious, it costs significant amount of government budget and then economic loss to the industries. So this is the case. And then, so as a result, Korea used to export a lot of meat to Japan, especially. And then our export tons and then amount was around in this year around this area, and then now it's almost zero in 2010, and then it did not recover. So this is a significant loss to Korea economy, and then this has a significant implication to the global supply chain of meat and then related product. So this is illustrate how the supply chain can be disrupted because of the outbreak of the disease of this case. So, and then what the Korean government has done is, since this is a so significant impact, the Korean government start to have a vaccination. So during this period, Korean government refused to vaccinate because they want to remain as a foot and mouth disease free countries. But they just give up that policy and then they start the vaccination. And then vaccination is a very, they spend significant amount of money for vaccination of the animals in this case. So this is one case I found that the natural disaster such as disease, contagious disease, has an implication to the global supply chains. It totally changed the trade patterns and the supply chains. And then moreover, the Korean government can, even though Korean government makes a lot of efforts, it's not enough, because even next year we can import this disease anytime. So it's important to have an Asian level protection. For example, the Asian has designated some group of experts in this disease. So if there's an outbreak in one country, they send the experts group to them so that they can contain within a very short period of time. So if you maybe if you protect within 1 week, 2 weeks, it's more efficient. If you come maybe 1 month later, then it's too late. It has been spread out too many farms already. So it's very costly to protect. So I think this is important for the regional level to have to prepare some export group or some vaccines or some disease, some pharmaceutical product, so that you can prevent it, and also maybe manage the situation more in a very short period of time. So, but actually, many developing countries don't have enough expertise, or they don't have access to the vaccines. They don't have the money. So they just let this disease spread. And then eventually, even though Korean government has spent significant amount of money, we eventually will import this disease next year. So all the efforts of the Korean government has made, it becomes wasted. So I think it's important to make some efforts in the ASEAN level.
Dr. Kim, can I ask you a question? It's maybe a little bit outside of your presentation. foot and mouth disease is there for 10,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago. But it's not happening. This happened. You had 2000, 2002, 2010, 11, 14. What is Korean government is doing wrong versus rest of the governments in the world? It happened in Europe in 2001.
Yeah.
Then it never happened there in Europe.
Yeah. It's very difficult to predict when you experience the outbreak. So Korean government does not know how it is important, because there are millions of people who is traveling to Mongolia, Vietnam, China. So it's very difficult to predict when will this disease will outbreak. So what happened is that Korean government prepared the vaccine stock as a safety stock, so that they want to attack, prevent the disease when it's outbreak. Sometimes, if a certain year you don't have outbreak, you just destroy the stock of the vaccines, because the vaccine has a limited shelf life. So it's very difficult to predict when and where it will happen. So that is the difficulty of the attacking this disease, this kind of disease. Another case is the Samsung logistics company. I'm sorry, I did not have a chance to translate this. This company is linking for 4PL services. 4PL means supplier, production, distribution, and customers. It's a logistics service companies in global scale. It's a Samsung-related subsidiary company in Korea.
What does it stand for? SDS?
I think it's
Samsung Distribution.
something like that. So they give some sourcing and the warehousing, transportation, in the air flight and the shipping, and then they have a global trade, and then they have some kind of a sophisticated software for the global logistics service. So this is the network. They are located in 23 countries. They have 105 offices all over the world. It's a global logistics service companies. So they have an office in Thailand. I'll just focus on Thailand operation. Samsung has built a factory in Thailand since 1989. They are producing refrigerator, and then air conditioner, and then oven, and then the so-called white product for the consumers, electronics. And then their production has continuously increased. And then they export from Thailand to Asia, North America, Europe, Middle East. So they have a very significant demand of the global logistics, because Thailand is a construction, maybe manufacturing base for those white consumer product. Their logistic demand in shipping has import is this 12,000 TEU. Their export is 112,000 TEU. This export by shipping. Air they import 5,500 tons of materials by shipping, by air, to export this much. So there's a very significant logistic demand in the Thailand. So there are major ports, Bangkok port. They use the Bangkok port is very congested. So they use Lim Chabang port in the Thailand. And then they use Dongmuang. They used to have a Sungvarvuni airport. But Dongmuang airport was significantly impacted during the flood period in 2011. And then looking at that, the Samsung has changed their policy of diversifying their port. They try to find the alternative port other than Lim Chabang port, but it's almost impossible because there's no alternative port in Thailand. But they could find they adopted the dual port airport system in Thailand. Instead of the one port, they adopted a dual airport system in Thailand, so that if one airport is not functioning, they want to use the other airport. So that is the one strategy they adopted since 2011. Another factor is that since then they have started to build the new manufacturing base in Vietnam. So the Vietnam government provide very attractive incentive, such as tax-free status for a certain period, and then they start to build the manufacturing base in Vietnam. And then since 2011, because of this the flooding risk, they maybe start to relocate their manufacturing base from Thailand in Vietnam. So they don't invest anymore in Thailand. They start to invest in Vietnam, and then they want to maybe over the period of time they want to close down some part of the Thailand factory and they relocate in Vietnam. So that is the kind of a long-term strategy for Samsung, because they want to maybe minimize the exposure to the risk in the logistics business. Of course, the low wage, the logistic risk is not the only factor to motivate Samsung to relocate in Vietnam. Also, the low wage also important factor for this decision to relocate their factory, move their factory from Thailand to Vietnam. Okay, so I want to have some summary of the recommendation for the business sectors and the government and the international organizations. So business should look at not only the efficiency, but also they have to look at the risk factors of the vulnerability or disruption from the natural disasters. So they have to maintain evaluate the robustness and the flexibility, agility, and the resilience of the global supply chains. For example, they have to increase their safety inventory, and then they have to maybe have a multiple sourcing strategy, and then multiple logistic centers, so that they want to minimize their impact of the natural disaster in their global supply chain. For the government, I think it's important to have some maybe expert group so that they can maybe handle the situation and overcome after the crisis has happened. And then they have to introduce this criteria in their development planning. And another factor is that they can do another strategy they can adopt is a risk pooling. For example, they have a kind of an insurance strategy so that they can have some kind of shared risk factors. And then they have developed a government structure and institution and resources to handle the natural disaster risk factors. Another one is that for international organizations such as ASEAN, they have to have some resources and capacity for knowledge transfer, because some developing countries don't have resources and the technology so that they can handle this natural disaster situation properly. So coordination and partnership is important. Another example a small example is that some stockpiling of the vaccine. So if there's some kind of disease outbreak, the Asian can send the vaccines or some pharmaceutical product so that they can contain within this the region for the outbreak of the disease. Okay, so in conclusion, I think global supply chain management is important, and then we have to think about the global cooperation, including assistance and technology transfer, and then investment, so that they can upgrade their the capacity to handle the situation.